And welcome to a brand new episode of Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, a host, and today in the program I am talking to Bitter Karella, the cradle of Midnight Pals, aka the Midnight Society. Now, if you have a Twitter account, you probably already know who I am talking about. Midnight_Pals, which basically every tweet is a conversation, it's a joke. It's a joke Twitter account featuring cradles of the horror genre that you probably already know about, having a conversation over a spooky campfire. Now, did I just do a piss-poor job of describing what Midnight Pals is? It's possible, but it's a good thing I have the cradle on this episode to do a better job of describing just what the hell this is and how she came up with it. Really fun episode. I hope you enjoy it. I have nothing else to say, so strap in, buckle that seatbelt, because it's gonna be a wild ride. All right, so before we get into the Midnight Pals, I don't know anything about you at all, which is uncommon. Usually I do more research, but this time I was lazy. So I would love it if you could just give me a good background on yourself and what you do and how eventually you got into doing the Midnight Pals.
Sure. So, I guess I'll just do the whole thing. My name is I go by the name Bitter Karella online. And my background is pretty uneventful. I am just a big fan of horror. That's the relevant thing for this podcast. I've dabbled in various things. I'm a text game designer and cartoonist. I've got a few graphic novels out. Malleus Maleficarum from Slave Labor Graphics, as well as Firebrat from Vivid Publishing, and Misunderstanding Comics, which was one that a friend of mine did with me on Kickstarter. But that's all kind of just background. The important thing is that I am the proprietor of a Twitter account called Midnight_Pals. And for those listeners who haven't heard of that, the idea is, well, I think everyone listening probably remembers that classic Nickelodeon series, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Right.
Where kids hang around a campfire, tell scary stories, scare each other. Well, I posited, what if instead of a group of kids telling stories, it was all your favorite horror creators? So it started out with writers and kind of expanded from there to include artists, directors, game designers, and they're basically little Twitter microfictions, which is dialogues between these various people that I just use to kind of gently rib a lot of my favorite horror creators. So I guess that's a little bit of the background, hopefully. Is there anything else I should say about myself?
Well, I mean, I'm definitely interested in hearing a bit about these graphic novels and text games you've made as well.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to talk about those as well. Very, very quickly, my graphic novel, first one, Malleus Maleficarum, is an adaptation of the book Malleus Maleficarum, which was a early modern witch hunting manual by two Dominican inquisitors. Most horror fans will probably have heard of it. It was kind of a big thing in its time. It did lead to the burning times in the deaths of some 40 to 60,000 alleged witches. And I thought this would be a great thing to adapt into a lighthearted comic book. So I did that. That's probably the most horror related comic that I've done. For text games, I do text games that have. I usually enter into the interactive fiction competition and Spring Thing, and they are mostly horror related. Night House is one where you play as a small child abandoned in a house. It's kind of retro 80s feel to it, and you just wander around, look for your missing family. Also, Santa Carcosa Nights, which is from the title, it sounds very Lovecraftian. It's a little more Hellstar Ramina inspired, and that is one where you are in an abandoned beachside town during the apocalypse, which was very much inspired by the current apocalypses that we're going through, since I guess there are multiple ones ongoing at the current moment.
They just keep stacking on top of each other at this point.
I know, it's like every week we got a new one, so it's like I think we were waiting for the we got like locusts coming down. I know there's a new plague happening. We're gonna have Gog and Magog marching down from Canada. Yeah, it's good times.
It is the best time. Nope.
We'll say it's interesting times. Interesting times.
It's a time, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know more about the beginning of the Midnight Endel School Pals. I want to know like what triggered like the start to begin the account, and when did it begin to take off? How was that like? Because it's a pretty popular account.
Well, I like to think so. I hope so. So it's kind of funny. It started, I guess, about a year ago or so, and what really happened was. My wife was reading a collection of Dean Koontz stories. I think it was Strange Highways. And she was not a fan. And she kept coming to me and reading passages from these stories to me just to show me how terrible they were. She just did not dig them. And I was listening to her read Dean Koontz's writing, and I made the joke, oh, this kind of sounds like Goosebumps. It kind of sounds like, reader beware, you're in for a scare. And she said, it's more like Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I was like, oh, that'd be funny if it actually was like Are You Afraid of the Dark? And Dean Koontz was telling a story, and he probably would tell it to other horror writers. And I thought about that, for a couple of days, and I was like, I'll post it on the Twitter because people love jokes on Twitter. So I posted it on my personal Twitter account, which is Bitter Karella, like my name, and I posted it was about 5 little jokes, and it blew up. For a given value of blowing up. For me, it was huge. I only had probably like 200 followers at that point, who are all my people I knew personally. And in like a week, I'd suddenly gone up to like 8,000 people following the account. And so that was huge for me. And of course, my first thought was, well, gee, I have more jokes. I wish I'd thought to post them all instead of just 5. Now I look like a thirsty fool if I post the rest of them. But then I thought, well, it's the internet. Everyone's thirsty. So why not? Why not actually just go forward? So I kept posting, and I mostly was posting about authors that I had read and knew a little bit about. And eventually it seemed like people, enjoyed what I was doing. And I just realized, well, the problem is this one thread that I've been adding to is now about like 500 posts long, and it's getting a little unwieldy. And a few people kept asking me when I was going to spin it off into its own account. And I just thought, well, makes sense because people coming here are coming to read these jokes. And if my personal Twitter account is mostly, it is mostly me just being extremely thirsty for larger women. That's kind of my thing. I was like, oh, there's so many attractive large women online. Let me just post how much I like them. And I realized that might, as I'm not shy about that, but it also might not be the content that people are coming for. So spun off Midnight Pals into its own thing. And that's kind of how it all got started. My wife is always annoyed. She's always claiming that I don't give her credit for actually being the genesis of the whole thing. But I'm the one who came up with the jokes, so I like to claim credit for that part.
Has she collaborated on any of these jokes since then?
Let me think. No, they're all me. No, she has she suggested a few authors, people that I should have in there. She doesn't do the joke. Um, she isn't fond of joking too much, but she was the one who was very insistent. Like, look, you got to do Thomas Ligotti. You got to get him in there. And I was kind of at first I was kind of like, well, I don't know how to make fun of Thomas Ligotti. But she kind of like she made some suggestions about like, well, look, here's kind of the tropes that he tends to rely on, and we do a little bit of brainstorming that way, but.
Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to do a web comic about Thomas Ligotti, and every issue would just be him having a good day. I just feel like he would hate that so much.
He doesn't seem like the sort of person who ever has a good day.
Yeah, call it like a happy Ligotti. I don't know. So, do you not read all the authors that you create as kill tools in these jokes?
Um, well, gosh, ooh, should I actually admit this? Yeah, I haven't actually read every author that I've brought in. I do read a lot of horror, so most of the ones that I talk about are ones that I have read at least a few short stories by, if not actual, books. There are a few that I've just kind of thrown in there because I feel like the real thing that I do is I don't want to make fun of anyone that I feel like I couldn't at least I don't know enough about them to at least make the jokes ring true.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the jokes really are kind of go off into the reeds and don't make a lot of sense. But I feel like there's some sort of essential truth to them that kind of, if not actually true to what an author says or does, somehow encapsulates a quality about them that kind of makes the joke work. There are a few in there that I mean that just came out of nowhere. For example, one of the running gags on the account is that Frank Belknap Long is a furry, which I don't know where that came from. That was just I just made some random joke about I think him and Lovecraft talking about their cats, and somehow it snowballed into this running gag about him being a furry, which which is I think people just joining the account later on are kind of sometimes confused by these running jokes that really don't have any basis in anything, but somehow it just seemed to work, and so I kept going with that. I think the one author that I can think off the top of my head that I have made fun of that I have actually not read is Vox Day, because I just basically was like, well, I kind of want to give this guy a shit for being a terrible Nazi. So,
Yeah.
I kind of threw him in there and made fun of him for a little while. I was very, very nervous at the time because I thought, well, this is probably the thing that's going to get the chuds attacking me. But I'm still around, so I guess it's okay. I weathered that.
Have you gotten much negative feedback from things like that?
Honestly, well, I don't want to say that everyone enjoys the account or enjoys the jokes. Obviously, there's always going to be some people who, it just doesn't click with or just don't get it. Those people are wrong, of course.
Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you like to laugh? The one bit of negative, the one negative reaction that I can recall, I don't know if I should say the name of the writer, but I did make fun of one writer who, and I thought it was pretty tame, honestly, compared to what I usually do. But he blocked me, and I mean, in his defense, I think he was having a bad day. He had been kind of dogpiled a little bit before that, so he probably just saw this and was like, "Well, what is this? Another?" And just like insta blocked. But
okay,
Mhm.
I have to ask you who, and I could always delete this section because now I'm dying. Is it by any chance?
In fact, it is.
Yes, I knew it. He just blocked me recently too.
Oh, hey, join the club. We should. I think that's kind of his thing. He's kind of famous for that.
Yeah, I think he just types his name in and just scrolls down the list and hits block.
It is funny because honestly, like I do rag on some authors pretty hard. I mean, I feel like I try not to. I do kind of want to make it something that's just kind of fun and not too scathing. But there are a couple authors I have kind of been a little mean to. I think I may have been a little too harsh on Joss Whedon, for example, just because I'm personally not a huge fan of his work. But it was just funny because the one author I basically just had him making a lot of random noises, zoopity boopity like that, which I thought was pretty inoffensive, but he didn't like that.
So accurate, though.
That's true. I mean, I was just telling her like it is.
I could, when I asked that question, I imagine possibly getting some shit on the ongoing racism of Lovecraft, because I know some folks do not dig that.
That's true. Yes. So that is one of Lovecraft, of course, is one of the first horror writers that I started ribbing on Midnight Pals. He's part of the core group. I usually think of the core group being Stephen King, Lovecraft, Dean Koontz, Edgar Allan Poe, and Clive Barker. And they've kind of evolved since the beginning almost into their own characters, which have very little to do with the actual authors that they're based on anymore. And Lovecraft, I always kind of envisioned as sort of the weird kid of the group, kind of the kid who would sit in the back of the classroom eating paste. So he's always been kind of written that way. That's my thought on him. But we all know that Lovecraft is or was a huge racist. And that has kind of been a recurring gag in Midnight Pals, just his obscene, even for the time, racism. And that's something I've always been a little it's something that is difficult to make light of, just because, well, I guess what I should say is I hesitate to use the phrase safe space because it is very loaded these days, but I do want the account to be I want it to feel welcoming to anyone who might come there. I don't want people to come to the account and just get confronted with a whole lot of ironic racism. Mm-hmm. And because that's not fun. And very often that sort of thing is really just kind of a fig leaf for real racism. So I've always, basically having a character who is extremely racist, but trying not to sugarcoat it too much. The solution that I've got hit on is just the fact that my Lovecraft is racist against literally everyone, and basically anyone who's not a wasp from Rhode Island.
Some thoughts I do have on that is the way you do portray it. The way I think it is more acceptable, the way you write it, is the way everybody else seems to react to it. Like, it's almost like, my God, Lovecraft, don't ruin this joke now. We're trying to talk about something else. They all are just so annoyed by him.
It is a thing where I think everyone, it's someone once replied to one of my tweets saying, like, why is Lovecraft still in there? Why do they keep him around? And someone said, it does feel like back in the 90s when your friends were just whoever happened to be at your school and you just had to hang out with those people no matter what. Which I think probably does explain it in the context of the fictional group, why they would have him around. Obviously they have him around because I like making jokes.
Yeah.
Usually
he just keeps showing up to the campfire. Who's going to kick him out? He's like, oh my God, exactly. He's coming back.
One of the things that I usually do is I kind of use his racism against Italians as a proxy for his general racism against most people. And although in real life I don't actually know if Lovecraft was racist against Italians, though I assume he was, since the list of people he was not racist against is a lot shorter than the ones that he was racist against.
Yeah, I have no evidence on me at the moment to prove that he was, but I 100% believe it just because it seems right.
Very weirdly, though, when I did research for this, apparently he was a huge fan of pasta, so he really enjoyed Italian food. which really goes against everything that I had believed about Lovecraft, because I assumed for some reason that he just ate bread, which was also a gag that I kept returning to.
Trying to imagine Lovecraft at like an all-you-can-eat pasta buffet is disgusting.
And that's something that has special resonance for me, but that's I'll leave that for another time.
What?
There is I'll say it here because I'll be 100% open and honest with everything. There's a running gag that amongst my friends about a sumptuous Italian feast, because when I spoke of large women earlier, whenever one reads erotic stories involving large women eating, they always mention, well, they're eating a sumptuous Italian feast. And that particular phrase has appeared in so many erotic stories that I just started using it whenever as shorthand whenever I'm talking to friends about that. Um, anyway, yeah. So yeah, whenever I think of Italian food, I was like, oh, sumptuous Italian feast.
That's
Uh,
pretty good.
Though it's funny because doing research on Lovecraft, when finding out things about him did open the avenue for a lot more jokes, since I found all about his relationship with Sonia Green, as well as apparently there was a time when they lived together, and they said that Lovecraft, his weight just ballooned up to 200 pounds while they were together. So I was like, oh, okay, well, obviously she's feeding him. Obviously she's into it. So that was another series of running jokes for a little while about that.
Wow. I did not expect to learn so much about Lovecraft. My God. So, one of my Phil's questions I asked you was about whether or not you read all of these people that you rib on, and I was surprised because it does seem like you're really knowledgeable about everybody you talk about, and it reads as if you're a big fan, well, not a fan of everybody, obviously, but that you have this knowledge about them that most readers might not. So, really impressed.
Thank you. I read most of them. There are a few that the ones that I haven't actually read. Usually, I do a little bit of. I'll have to ask around my friends and be like, "Hey, has anyone actually read this person? Can you give me an idea of what they sound like?" Because there are a couple like I'm looking at. I've got the book right in front of me now, just kind of going through trying to see which ones I'm actually not familiar with. Because I actually have not read any August Derleth. Um,
Beats
or
me. I don't know who that is.
yeah, he was part of Lovecraft Circle, so
Oh.
kind of and I just when I read up about him, he was the guy that took a lot of Lovecraft's original mythos, or I should say, he took a lot of Lovecraft's ideas and crafted the mythos that we now think of as the Lovecraft mythos. So his joke in the Pals is he's just a Lovecraft fanboy who is always defending Lovecraft no matter what happens. And let's see. Other than that, like oh, and John Ferris I have not read as well, but he was one that my wife had. So she told me all her complaints about his writing, and I was just like, this is gold.
Do you have like a book of ongoing ideas that you jot down? Like, well, eventually I'm gonna have to bring this up in a conversation.
I do. I basically have a big spreadsheet of horror writers and creators that I would like to get in there at some point.
Yeah.
Part of it is there are some that I need to get in, but I just have not been able to find a way to. I've not found a joke that really works for me for them yet. Peter Straub has been one that I've wanted to get in there since the beginning, and I still haven't really found a way to make it work. Not that there's nothing funny about Peter Straub, just I haven't really hit on a gag that works properly for me, because there are I don't know how, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but there are rules to the jokes that I try to keep a certain tone, and if something doesn't really work with that tone, often I'll just kind of I'll abandon it.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're thinking about it like as a stand-up comedian would think about the jokes they present, because I mean, this Twitter account is a series of jokes and gags. It's really funny and entertaining. So it makes sense that you put so much thought into each joke.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. There are there's a rhythm that some things just work on Twitter, some things don't. It's hard very often. I mean, I often don't understand it myself. I just kind of type things out and look at it and be like, yeah, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And there are certain rules, but I break them pretty consistently if it feels right. It is kind of funny at this point where there are people who now call me out when I get my own canon incorrect, which is funny to think that there's canon to this now. Usually there isn't. It's just whatever the needs of the joke are. So in one joke, it might describe them as being in Stephen King's backyard. In another one, they might be in Edgar Allan Poe's backyard, and people will point out, hey, why are they in different spots now? And it's kind of funny because I have to say like, well, different nights they might switch up, when the real reason is, well, I just because I don't care.
That is really cool though, that you've managed to build up this canon and you have this fan base. That's awesome.
It is very very gratifying. I'm very happy that this is something that really seems to resonate with people. Like I said, I'm a big horror fan, so it's really been a thrill to be able to share that with people, and especially when a few horror writers have even responded, which I never expected to happen, but it
Oh,
just was. I was just stoked, beyond the moon to see that.
what kind
Um,
of feedback have you gotten from those you've written about?
so most of them seem to take it in pretty good humor. They're I'm trying to think. I think off the top of my head, I think Slimy Swamp Ghost said that he considered it an honor to be in there, which was very cool because I'm a big fan of his work, and he's one of the great horror artists out there on the net these days. We did recently put out a book because we had an Indiegogo campaign to kickstart. Sorry, not to kickstart, to crowdfund.
Yeah.
Crowdfund a book, to use the generic term. And what was very exciting is Brian Keene actually offered to do the introduction. So that was a huge get, because that was always really surprising that he really was a big fan of the account, because his books are just top tier horror writing as well. So
Absolutely. I was
big fan.
I was leading into the book, so I'm glad you brought it up. What can you tell us about the book and how can folks get it?
Sure. So the book is, I call it the best of the Midnight Pals. It is basically a collection of tweets from the account. It's about 100 pages worth of tweets, so a lot of them. But I just collected all the best ones, all my favorite gags, all my favorite bits, and kind of compiled them. And of course, they're all available for free online. So I wanted to add a little extra into the book that I thought would make it worth actually getting. So there are a few things in here as well. Brian Keene's introduction, of course, is in there and should be read. But there's also I have a few little mini essays about my own thoughts on the horror genre, which I of course, think are very important to share. Other people may have their own opinions. And also, one of the things that I decided to put in was little, not just the dialogues between the storytellers, but some of the actual stories that they would tell, by which I mean sort of short one-page parodies written in the style of a few of the authors.
Oh no,
So
that's awesome. I did not realize that.
yeah. So there's a story by Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Junji Ito, Thomas Ligotti, Edward Lee as well. And let me see, there are a few other, Lovecraft, of course, Anne Rice. And actually, and one, which was one of our backers, got the prize to choose an author to put in there. And it was an author that at the time I wasn't familiar with, and that's Octavia Butler.
Oh wow.
So I actually had to go to the library and get
Yeah.
a bunch of her books to kind of get familiar with her. Um, she's kind of tangentially related to horror, but I have broken the horror rule a few times to include authors that I just really wanted to get in there. I've really been on a J.K. Rowling kick for the last few weeks,
I've noticed.
because I keep thinking I really need to get away from her, because I'm really bending the concept of the account to the breaking point with her. She has no connection to horror, but she just keeps saying these things that are so. I just have to get my licks in. So,
Oh
um,
yeah, I enjoyed the one you recently did. I think it was Poe. He was beginning the thread, and he just paused, and someone was like, "What? What's going on?" And he was like, "Oh, I thought I was gonna get interrupted." Then she just begins shouting, "Hello!"
yeah, she's kind of. It's become more and more challenging with J.K. Rowling because like I said, I don't want people to come to the account and just be confronted with a bunch of, slurs or something. So I've, for a long time, I was kind of dancing around J.K. Rowling's transphobia, making jokes where it was very, I think anyone who was familiar with her would instantly know what it was all about, but I wouldn't really say the words. Um, and in just the last couple of weeks, I think it's just gotten to the point where it's like, well, you know what? It's out there now. So I'm not even gonna be coy. She's really, well, I guess in the parlance of the time, showing her whole ass. So might as well go with it. But
Yeah, someone recently tweeted something about how it's really similar to the way we all gradually discovered Lovecraft's racism.
yeah, that very it is similar to Lovecraft, and it's like we always say Lovecraft was racist for his time, and it's like, well, J.K. Rowling kind of transphobic for her time as well. Um, I have to say another thing that I was one of the other authors that noticed the account and I was especially very thrilled about was Diane Duane because I mean I'm not familiar if she actually has done any horror. I'm mostly familiar with her fantasy work because I was a huge fan of her Young Wizard series when I was a kid. So that was another huge thrill for me. And I've been telling everyone, like, you know what, everyone skip Harry Potter, read the Young Wizard series. That's the one we should all be reading.
Wow, I don't know about these books, but I'm gonna have to check them out now.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. I mean, of course, I read them when I was about 10, so so I don't know how much fun they would be for adults, but they are good books. They're I highly recommend them, and to anyone that I can.
Have you given any thought to expanding beyond the twiddle and like a book? Like I don't know, like in my head, I think it would be an amazing like cartoon series, or even possibly a podcast.
That would be super cool. I would love to if I had the ability to make it into a cartoon series. Of course, it'd have to be pretty different. The right now, a lot of the jokes do depend on it being just in written form because they're jokes that usually rely on people not being able to see what's happening until it's explained at the very end. So it would have to be a completely different thing. A podcast would be very nice, except that I have to get some folks who can actually do voices because
Yeah, it.
um,
I would see it like as like an actual cast.
yeah, yeah. I do have I'll mention it here, even though this is kind of pie in the sky at this point. I do have a public access television show here in my local town, so no one can see it because it's local public access.
Yeah.
But it is on, but I do have it online as well, and it's like a horror host show, very similar to Elvira or Svengoolie, or I'm not sure who the kids would know nowadays. But I've thought of actually expanding that to talk about horror writers and just talk about my love for horror writers as opposed to just showing movies. So that's something that I'm planning to do as soon as I get a green screen here at home. It should be arriving soon. I haven't been able to actually go down to the local public access studio because of quarantine. So that's something that even though I've been planning for a while, I haven't really been able to get off the ground. But if anyone does want to check out, what I've got so far from my TV show, it's called Deep Cuts, and it is on. Well, I guess it's on YouTube. I suppose I should put the link somewhere. But
I can link it in the show notes as
oh,
well.
sure.
I am. I have so many questions, but we don't have time. I have a deep fascination with those late night talk show hosts, and I did not expect you to tell me this, and that is incredible. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely it's another thing that I grew up on those shows, on those late night horror host shows. It's part of my love for horror, of course, is just these old movies. But so that was something that I just wanted to get into, and when I realized, oh hey, you can just be on TV. You can just do it. I thought, well, why not? I can be one too. So that's something that, it just kind of dovetails nicely. I'm not good at creating horror. I'm not like, a scary guy or anything, but I do love the form, and this just, these are just ways that I like to kind of pay tribute to that.
Yeah, I mean, you're an excellent comedian too, so it's really cool to have a comedian who is themed around the genre. There's not many comedians like that. That's awesome.
It's true. There isn't. It is kind of a niche thing, which maybe that's why it seems to work so well. I don't feel like there's a lot of. Well, there are obviously there are a lot of horror creators who are funny and include humor in their work. Thomas Ligotti, of course, has some really funny bits, and even
I love his stand up special on Netflix. What is it called? Sunshine.
Sunshine in Foreign Land. Well, he does love clowns so much, so it makes sense. Um, but, but yeah, this is, I should say, and of course, it's funny because so many people have always been asking me, like, when are you going to put Garth Marenghi in there? And I'm like, well, he's not real.
Right.
He's not a real horror writer. And I mean, he is a comedy. He's funny. So I do love Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, but it seems kind of weird to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this parody down a notch. It's like, doesn't quite work. But
have you thought about adding yourself into one of them, like how Stephen King did in his Dark Tower books?
Ooh, well, I do love attention, so it is very tempting. I haven't found a way to do that without coming across as extremely thirsty, but I will. That's my goal. One of these days.
Okay, great. Now we're basically out of time at this point, but I do know we talked about this before the podcast happened that you agreed to do a brief reading of one of your threads to end the show. So go right ahead, and once you finish, end credits. So once again, thank you for coming on. Did you have anything else you wanted to say or promote?
Sure. Well, very briefly, I'll just say if you've enjoyed anything that you heard tonight, check out the Twitter account. It's at midnight_pals. You can read all the good stuff there. There's also links to buy my book. Buy my book. I will also mention that currently there is a PDF available as well, and I have a deal going on right now where you can buy it for half off using the code Minnesota, and all proceeds from that will go to benefit the Black Visions Collective in the Twin Cities, which works to help promote Black liberation and radical transformative justice, which I think are things that we really need more of right now.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll read a little bit from the book here. I can't do voices, so just imagine I'm doing some funny voices, and imagine the scene is it's around a campfire, and our favorite horror writers are just hanging out and telling tales. All right, so this is Lovecraft speaking. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this the Tale of the Dusky Foreigner. I mean, indescribable eldritch abomination. And then Poe says, describe it. Lovecraft. It looks spooky, like an Italian. And then Lovecraft, again, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this a tale of the eldritch horror. So this horror is so eldritch. Poe, what does it look like? Lovecraft. I can't tell you. It would make you go crazy. Dean Koontz. Whoa. So this eldritch abomination is so eldritch that you can't even look at it. It's indescribable. It's just horror beyond imagining. Your brain can't even comprehend it. But also it looks like a squid. This story is also about a giant squid from space. It's got lots of tentacles, just like a million tentacles. Poe, what's with you and the tentacles? Lovecraft. I just think they're interesting. That's all. So that's a little bit right there.
Well,
it's
thank
probably
you.
better to read it yourself, so I recommend checking out the Twitter account, and you can actually read it in better voices than I can do here.
One more time. What is the Twitter account that they can go follow?
That's at midnight_pals. Don't forget the name. Midnight_pals.
Please go do that now. Thank you for listening. Alright, thank you for listening to a new episode of Ghoulish. If you liked what you just ingested through your brain waves, why don't you go leave a review on iTunes? You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing. We also publish books at perpetualpublishing.com. So if you're sick of listening to sounds, you can read text with your eyeballs. Does that sound creepy? You fucking better believe it, baby!
Live spooky, die spooky. Ha ha!